work with and how we work with them. So with that, I'm delighted to invite Karolina to speak to you this morning. She's going to give us a talk to share her experience and insights, having moved from another part of Europe to the UK. And then Joao and I will speak, and for those of you who were here at the very beginning, will have heard me say, we're from 3 different continents. So we're going to have that intercontinental discussion post Karolina's talk. Karolina, they're all yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me just share a screen with you, and I will, okay, that's now shared. Let me, wait, oh, okay. So can you all see the screen with the main slide?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes, excellent. So just a quick introduction. My name is Karolina Wlodarczyk. I currently work at Lamarck Group. It's a company located outside of St. Ives in Cambridgeshire. And I work with distributors globally. As a head of export, I get to travel and I get to speak to people, and I find it very exciting, and it's really a great opportunity to have. Moving on to the next slide. Just a quick overview of my initial experiences in the UK. When I arrived to the UK in 2009, after I graduated from university. Despite being qualified to university standards, I have a master's degree in English studies. These qualifications were not transferable in the UK market. So I managed to secure 2 production jobs. So I was a production operative in 2 companies where I couldn't really share my skills and abilities. I wasn't really considered for any other positions. So it was only when I found an advertisement for an export administrator role at Lamarck that my skills were recognized, and I decided to go for it. I attended an interview, and that's how I got the job. During my early time at Lamarck, I discovered that the company was very export focused, and my managing director, Stuart Gibbons, he's been recognized as an export ambassador. This is a title that he was given by the DIT, the Department of International Trade. And he was very keen to promote Lamarck and expand to other countries. So the company understood that my linguistic abilities and my cultural background was very important and key and very beneficial in me developing sales overseas and relationships within the Eastern Europe and Russian Federation. Let me just quickly move on. I think I lost a slide. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So in this slide, I decided to put 4 key elements of a foreigner coming into the UK. And what was the most important for me is that my skills were transferable and I could share them and I could actually use them as an advantage when I was interviewing for different jobs. And I realized that it was a different approach towards a non-UK citizen. And I really, I was hoping when I arrived first in the UK that my skills would be recognized. However, that happened at a later time, which I think in a way, it gave me the experiences that I have now and I can share with you all. So moving on with another slide, I decided to just group a few essential aspects of supporting non-UK nationals in the UK from an employer point of view and from an employee point of view. I discussed this briefly with my managing director, who in a way helped me to shine the light at the aspect of what you can do as an employer to help a non-UK national. So the most important aspects are always to get information regarding non-UK nationals, and by that I mean get to know where they are coming from, what is the country that they are coming from, what is their background, and get the information to help them feel at ease when they when you employ someone from another country. This is very, very important. Always try and offer support, and by that I again mean get as much information as you can. I was offered a lot of support 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago, when we had the referendum whether UK will be leaving EU or not leaving EU. There were several events after the referendum was published and the decision was made that didn't really make me feel safe in a way. So my employer made sure that I felt like a part of a family. They made me feel welcome. There was a big meeting where they showed me and my colleagues from other countries as well that we are a part of the family and we are considered close, we are considered welcome at any time. And that was really, really essential for me as an employee. And again, as an employer, I do believe that if you encourage and ensure the continuity of employment is very key. Some of my Polish friends decided to leave the UK after the referendum in the last years because they were not, they were afraid that they didn't have enough information, and they decided to make a decision to leave before even speaking to the employers because they didn't get that reassurance that they will still have employment. I remember speaking to my friends, they were asking me if I know anything, if I have any information, what is going to happen. And they asked me this because my employer had the information, and that was really, really key. And just some points from me as an employee. I am prepared to upskill, and I am prepared to educate myself because from my past experiences, I knew that it would be very essential for me to get certificates, to get further diplomas, because that would definitely make me a very, very interesting asset in a company. And I speak from experience. I always like to learn, and I do like to get more and more qualifications. And I know that me sharing my cultural knowledge and the awareness of the opportunities and risks of trading with other countries. This is me now speaking as a salesperson at Lemark. That is also a big asset, and I managed to work with several more countries when I became a sales manager at Lemark. That was very key. And again, my skills were recognized and my employer saw the skills because I can speak a Slavic language, which comes from a family of Slavic languages in Europe. And that made it easier for me to communicate, to understand the needs. Plus, I come from Poland and I share the border with Czech Republic, with Slovakia, Slovakia more than Slovenia, Russian Federation. So there was that instant connection that helped me build relationships and actually expand Lemark to further land, let's say. And this is the last slide that I decided to just focus on positive aspects and just the key aspects of being an employee in the UK, but also being an employer who is considering employing someone from another country. This all goes for everyone. Be prepared to go the extra mile. As an employer, be prepared to go the extra mile and get to know your employee, get to know them, where they come from, what are the struggles, what they think, if they have any fear, if there's any anxiety, from speaking from experience. If I didn't have that information, if I didn't have that reassurance from my employer, I would have probably decided to return to Poland with very little opportunities, because where I come from, it's a very small town with very little opportunities. But because I felt confident in my employer that they will help me and they will support me, I decided to continue, and I decided to grow, and I decided to stay, because I really, really love being in the UK. And one of the reasons I started learning English is me watching films, reading books, and I've always wanted to come here. I did my master's degree in Victorian studies, so Victorian period is my most favorite period in the UK history. So I've always wanted to be here, and I would really like to stay for as long as I can. Be open and willing. Again, as an employer, be open and willing, and show that you consider that employee from another country a part of a family, even a part of something bigger and better than just individuals coming in, doing the 9 till 5, getting the paycheck, and that's it. That I learned from my current employer, and that is very, very crucial. Go for the opportunities. This, I would think, is mostly me using my experience as an employee, not being afraid of speaking up, not being afraid of doing something new, and of grabbing the opportunity. For me, that opportunity was me reading the advert in a newspaper and applying for a job at Lamarck. That was a stepping stone for me, definitely, in my further development in the UK. Be the driving force. Support. That's how I understand be the driving force. So support your employees. As an employee, be the driving force. Don't be afraid to share your ideas. Don't be afraid to speak up. I've got a great example in my managing director, who is the driving force, and I learn from him a lot. He is the driving force because he understands the importance of employing people with different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, with different languages, because these are all skills. And he goes along the way to upskill the employees, to show how many opportunities there are. So I think that this is very, very important, especially if you decide to employ someone from a different country. And last, I think, is the most important, but that's again, as I'm sharing my point of view and my experience as an employee, know your value. This is very important, because if you don't know your value, you may miss out on great opportunities. Again, using the experience of my friends and colleagues who didn't really see any value in them, any value that they were bringing in to the company. They are now living again in Poland. I hope that they are doing really well, but they didn't actually understand how great it is to be coming from a different country, sharing the culture, sharing the background, sharing experiences, sharing a different point of view, which I believe is really, really important, and it actually enhances and makes the companies thrive. That would be all from me. Thank you very much for listening. I will now close this slideshow. Let me just, oh yeah, okay. And I will stop sharing the screen as well. Okay.
Great.
I'm back.
Thank you very much, Karolina.
Thank you very much for listening.
Excellent. So excellent points raised there on both sides. Yes, Pat, absolutely, Pat. A quick round of applause for
Thank you very much,
Karolina. And really fantastic central point of kind of it goes both ways. So we'll open it up for discussion. You can ask Karolina anything about what she said, or you can throw a question out to us as a panel where we give you different perspectives. I'm just going to ask Jiao to quickly introduce herself so that you know also the sorts of questions you can ask. So Jiao, it's all yours.
Sure. Thanks very much, Shima. Karolina, I really enjoyed your talk, especially about the point of being open-minded and, you know, really know what value that you could add to not just the company, but maybe the country as well. Hi everyone, my name is Jiao Li. You can call me Jiao. I'm from China, as maybe you can tell from my accent. I did my master's degree in finance at London School of Economics in 2011, and then I decided that I don't like finance at all, so I started to look around for other possibilities. And I bumped into marketing. That's why I decided, I think that's a really interesting subject, and I would like to see how my career can develop towards that area. Then I got recruited by Unilever from London here. I joined as a management trainee, and I would say the first 7 years of my career development was mainly around a very culture diverse company culture and also the environment as well. Being worked in both the UK and in China, I think I've developed a way of embracing different cultures, which I really appreciate after I started my own company. So I started my own company with my CEO team in Cambridge in 2017, and it's now, we are 3rd year in. Our company is called Crayfish. What we do is we build an online platform which connects the Chinese-speaking talents and the business who need help to go to the East Asian market. So my business is basically building the bridge among different cultures, especially from the Europe, the West, the US to the Asian market. So from my experiences, it's from being employed in a very culture diverse company or environment to building a company that I would like to call our culture is quite diverse as well. We have people who is currently working in Finland, in China, in the UK, in Hong Kong, as well, and a lot of our freelancers or service providers are located around the globe. So it's very important for me to see the world is actually not drifting apart as what it's currently doing. So I'm very keen to join this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jiao. Thank you very much. That kind of really puts things into context. Most of you know me, I'm a repurposed engineer. When I'm not here, I am the Director of Entrepreneurship for Sustainability at the University of Cambridge. And I came to the UK 21 years ago. I'm originally Egyptian, so hence the 3 continents span. So yes, the floor is all yours, lady, for questions. Pat, go for it.
So I'm just finishing writing a book about menopause in the workplace. And so I was researching employment law in different countries. And actually I found it a real challenge to find like an official website for different countries. So you could look up just a link to where the employment law was. So I just wondered for people who've come to this country, how easy was it to find out what you could expect from employers and employment law in this country? Because I found it a total challenge looking at other places.
Do you mean in my country, in Poland? Yes. What are the...
I just wonder how you found it here, understanding what you could expect from employers and, you know, and from contracts in this country.
I must say that only when I started working at Lamarck, I knew exactly what I stand on, because my previous jobs as a production operative, there's a different attitude towards employees, be it foreigners or even UK citizens. They don't see you as a person in a way, but you're just working hands. So you just get the basic contract and that's it. You have no way of discussing anything else. This is what it is. However, at Lemark, there are procedures in place. There's a company status. There's all sorts of paperwork, staff handbook, where I can always go to and read what I need to find out, what I need to know. And this is a very open working place where all information is at hand. So we have a very active HR person who is also there to support employees, which I find really, really helpful. And yes, and I know exactly what I stand on.
Joe, would you like to take the?
Yeah. So I think in the UK, people are doing a really good job in terms of publishing this type of information online. So I think doing Google search sometimes is enough for people who are in the UK to understand the basic laws or the basic things to watch out for in contracts. But when I joined the Unilever, we actually had a 7 days away training, and half of the day was purely basically on the HR issues and the things that you need to be aware as a person who is just stepping in your career path. I found that's really helpful. What else? And I think the other thing is if it's a bigger company where you have a dedicated HR team or a person, as Karolina mentioned, then she or he must be the main source of you getting the right information from as well.
I think from my perspective, it's a bit like Giles. There's so much information out there. I didn't know, I wasn't specifically told. Most of my source of information, what I have to say, has been fantastic from the union. Joining the union was one of the best things I did in terms of getting information and having someone to speak to. That when something did seem strange or want to employ something, or the university says no to something, I can have that conversation and they turn around and go, well, that's, either you can do this or you can't do that, or they can't do that. And yeah, I think mostly it's down to personal endeavors, who you know, and being able to get somebody to sit down. So hearing that Karolina and actually Giles, that with Unilever and Merck, that there are HR people that are working specifically to clarify that is really important, because not all HR people are created equal. There are others who would rather you didn't know certain particular details that are more in your favor. Other questions? Yeah, Priya?
I was just going to add to that, if that's okay. So I don't know if I've mentioned this here before. I'm actually originally from Malaysia. That's where I was born. But I did train in the UK. And and I think, Pat, to answer your question, it's dependent on the company. I think every company is different. So it sounds like Jiao and Karolina are working in really big companies, and you've got established systems in place to support staff on HR matters. Whereas if you've got private institutions or smaller companies, I think maybe the systems are not as in place. And also, like what Shima was saying, I think not all HR personnel or the systems are created equal. So, they probably, some places they do the minimal approach where, and then it's up to the individual then to Google search and try and find out what else is out there if they don't have their own union, which also, and not all workplaces have their own union.
Would I be able to chip in as a HR person? So absolutely, we're not all created equal. Something that I found really helpful, Pat, because I work across lots and lots and lots of different regions in the world, is actually the expat websites. So lots of countries have expat websites. and often they're run by law firms that are looking for fees to help you, support you to enter different countries, but there's loads of information on them to help people get started on moving to a new country and what the laws and regulations are from an employment basis. So I definitely point people in those directions, as well as the support we provide in-house.
So Nikki, who do you work for? Is that, if you don't mind us asking?
Yeah, I work for ABCAM, so the life sciences company on the biotech park.
And see, you guys are doing a good job. I know other people who work at ABCAM, and I think your HR has a reputation of working well.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yes, well done.
Thank you. I formerly worked for Corn Foods, actually, and then lots of the things that Karolina was saying around individuals moving back to their home countries when Brexit was announced was a challenge for us, and we actually trained lots of people from temporary to permanent contracts to give them that reassurance. But yeah, ABCAM's doing a fab job.
Can I just add one thing, Pat? If you go to gov.uk, I use that website to learn about other countries as well. So there's some clear information about countries and further links to take you to certain websites where you can get more information, definitely. So that's one to do as well, yeah.
Nikki, what was the website that you recommend for expats?
So there's loads, actually. There's loads, and I'm not just talking. So in the UK, I would always point people to ACAS and the government website that's just been mentioned. But I was actually meaning for, you know, where I've set up offices in other countries, or we're encouraging people. As an example, I've got people that are relocating out to the US and that actually already work for us. So part of that is encouraging them to understand, you know, other things about their benefits and what they might need to consider and what's appropriate for them. So there's expat websites in Canada, across Europe, you know, that are designed for people moving between countries to understand those. So I mean, I've probably got a list that I can share and that I can dig out, but there's lots of different ones.
Nikki, if you could share it on the LinkedIn group, I think it's going to be of great value to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Karolina, I was wondering, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And as someone who came from South Africa to England 25 years ago, I can relate to quite a lot of what you've said. However, because my father was originally from Leicester in England, I felt culturally that there was quite a lot that was familiar, but there's so many subtle things that I had to unlearn because we grew up, when I grew up in South Africa, for example, we had an equity ban because of apartheid. So we weren't allowed any British films. So we were brought up with American literature and film. So we call car a station wagon as opposed to an estate car. And there's so many things in our language that I had to unlearn. But what I was very interested was you said that you feel somebody coming into the UK needs to be prepared to upskill and educate themselves to meet UK standards of employment. I was wondering, how did you know what to do? I mean, on the one hand, you've got education, but on the other hand, there's those cultural differences. So what was your experience of navigating this?
I mean, it took me a few months, up to a year, I think, to actually find out what exactly it is that I'm being asked to do, because I would be applying, well, so my first point of contact to look for employment was agencies. So I would be applying for different types of jobs, mainly office jobs, but then I would be informed that I need to be more experienced in using Excel spreadsheets, data entry, and I was given information to go to job centers. I think job centers were the main source of information for me initially, because they suggested that I apply to different colleges who offer free of charge trainings. So that's how I started. So that was my first experience. I joined online. I was living in Huntingdon at the time, and it was one of the colleges in Huntingdon. And I was doing this online. I was upskilling in using Excel spreadsheets. But then it was only when I found Lamarck I was given more information, because a company like Lamarck, there's a lot of colleges sending out emails promoting the schemes that they offer, the courses. So that's when I actually started more serious training that helped me upskill in business, definitely, because my background is languages and English studies. So this was a complete shock to my system. But again, a well-informed employer who's willing to invest in the employees, I believe that is the key, because they were given that information and they shared that information. So every time there's new training available, we would be informed either in a mail or in the morning meeting. So everyone who is willing and wants to be upskilled, we are free to do so. Yes, and I must say that it's a big advantage in the UK, because most of those trainings are being funded by the government. It's not something that I'm familiar in Poland with, but in the UK, this is really, really well funded, and I hope it continues for not just me, but other people as well. And it's not just for foreigners; it's for everyone who would like to upskill, definitely, especially in the job role.
Thank you. And Karolina, that's really useful, but what about the subtle sort of cultural differences in the workplace? Did you notice anything that stood out for you that you had to get used to?
I think in the last 5 years, I would think that there were several things. I can't really think of anything that really stands out. Maybe because, again, my background is English studies. I learned about the culture. I learned about different manner of just behavior. I'm really trying to think of something.
So, Karolina, why don't you take a moment to think about it? I can see Zhao smiling, so I'm wondering whether you've got something to add here.
Yes, because I've never studied English literature or English history, so I got quite culture shock when I actually started my career path. Just 1 month in, I got feedback from line manager that my colleagues think me as rude and blunt. And I asked why, and they said the way you talked is just so rude. I didn't understand, and they gave me some examples. Now, 7 years after I was relocated here, I completely understood why I was rude. But when I started, I think Chinese language is quite different from English. So what I did was translated Chinese into English directly and talked to my colleagues, and they found it quite rude. Just 2 very simple examples. One is I went to one of my colleagues and said to him, could you give me this stack by 3 o'clock this afternoon? And that's my colleague, not, starting drinking from 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I insisted ordering food for the whole table before everyone could order any drinks. So that's just two very small examples of, how you could be perceived rude. It's not that I would like to offend anyone. Or another thing is, in Chinese, when you say "I know," it means that, okay, I understand what's your point now, and okay, I've learned something from you. But in English, when you say "I know," it means completely different things. It means that, okay, stop talking, I know what you're talking about. So whenever my boss said to me something, I said, oh, I know that. So this type of things, it reflects as language differences, but deeply I know it's culture differences, where you have to think a little bit differently. I can't just translate my Chinese into English and talk to people. I actually need to reflect. And no, Shima said, just when we open, Shima said, we don't have to change ourselves. We have to be, the system has to change for us. But these subtle things, I think you need to learn to be accepted, not just in the workplace, but also in the society as well. Otherwise, I don't think I could find my husband. Yeah, that type of thing.
I actually agree with the language differences, and then as a result, this is a cultural difference. I'm also considered as blunt. I'm very on point, I'm very direct. And I haven't changed that in the last 5 years. It's not because now people who work with me, they understand where I'm coming from. Lucky for me, I didn't have any meetings with my manager telling me that I'm very rude. It just sort of mixed in the whole, in the company. So I am now, apparently now I'm being considered as driven. Maybe I'm no longer blunt and rude, I'm driven. So that was a very good transfer for me, from being rude and blunt to being driven, because that actually means something. That's a good quality in my eyes now. But everyone understands now that I wasn't just being rude. It's just I'm from a different country. So yeah, that's one main one, definitely.
Leslie, were you adding to this conversation?
Yes, it was. And there's a couple of points as I listen to this that I think might be relevant. One, in terms of picking up on Shima. Oh, wow, I love the way the flask matches the top, matches the lipstick, matches the earrings. My goodness, that's taking it to a whole new level. But basically, in terms of the changing the system, I think it's fair to say that an awful lot of British people, however well educated they are in terms of qualifications, even though we travel overseas, have very, very, very little real idea about other cultures. And some of that is because we can get away with just speaking English. There's a lot of countries where you have to speak another language for work or for whatever else, or being bilingual is seen as being natural. But it's only when you, as the ladies have already said in this, when you're coming from a different language, you start to realize that things don't always translate. And I've got a personal story on this one, because I speak fluent English. I don't speak fluent anything else other than maybe grumpy on a bad day. But my dad was half Russian, half English, and spoke 6 languages fluently, of which English was the only one that got passed on to me, which is a historical thing, because in the 1950s, 1960s in the UK, we didn't really think much of the Germans. We weren't sure about the Russians because they were communist. We didn't really like the Chinese, which covered off Cantonese and Mandarin, which were 2 of the languages he spoke. So he was left with English and a smattering of French. Yeah, so that's all I ever heard him speak at all. Then many years later, I went and studied Russian as a postgraduate diploma. And it was absolutely enlightening for me, because I've always been told off for 2 things. Being too direct, and also being too long-winded. And then I studied Russian. And I realized, of course, and yeah, I can see you nodding, Karolina, there was the cultural aspect about being direct and addressing the issue that needed to be addressed. And I picked it up from my dad, even though, you know, that had never been anything in my background. And then, of course, if you speak Russian, you do, Russians like to describe things. So as I'm sitting on my chair feeling comfortable and the wind's blowing outside and I'm seeing Katerina, who looks very pretty in her office and has got some interesting plants, nodding at me, I have the following thought. It's not an English way of expression, but it is culture, and it's so deeply embedded. You don't even have to have studied the language or the whatever for the intergenerational aspects of this to be passed on. But there's lots of places in the UK where people haven't got a clue. I mean, I live on the west coast of Scotland, and although Glasgow is a pretty international city with 3 universities, where I live in Ayrshire, some of the smaller towns around about me, we still have people who haven't travelled up to Glasgow ever in their lives, which is only 26 miles away, because it's a cultural thing. And I know this happens in other countries. So there's something about educating people here who've got no reason to believe that there's something they need to learn in the other side of it, because it's only when one starts to appreciate that there are differences and it's not just about language or translation or whatever else, that you start to get it on both sides. Otherwise, we throw it totally in the camp of the person who is obviously coming from another country. And also bear in mind that there are people like me, there's people like me who are totally UK born, but they look different. You know, if they've got Asian parents or Chinese parents or something like that. So there's a bit of a genetic indication that there might be another culture going on. But then there's people like me who don't look as if there's necessarily something going on, but we've still got the same thing. And I think there's just something in there. So a bit long-winded, very Eastern European explanation of it, I guess. But that there is something about educating people in the UK about some of these nuances so they can come halfway across the bridge to understand.
So I'm going to kind of throw in the kind of, I think we've kind of got to continue and a slightly different light on that. So I'm 100% not born or bred here. And even though it can be heard when I speak, because my English is so fluent, people assume I'm entirely assimilated here. So I get the complete thing. I am not treated as different, but I come with different cultural norms. So I spend a lot of my time having to actually consciously and explicitly explain that I am not from here. And this is how I may or may not think differently about certain things, just to help others not assume that I'm 100% embedded here. And it's quite weird, because it isn't something I would necessarily want to do, but I fell into so many traps of people just assuming I was completely from here and sorted and done, and then I would do something that would surprise them, or they would do something that would shock me, that I realized, no, I need to be a lot more explicit of, I spent more than half my life, my formative years, not here. I came as an adult. There are things I still don't understand. And having lived in a flat when I first came to do my PhD with 5 other women, only one of which was English, and then she left and she didn't really want to speak to us much throughout this, but that wasn't because she was English, she had her own issues. But within a couple of months, we ended up a Swedish girl, a Chinese girl, a French girl, a girl from Trinidad, and a girl from Egypt in this flat. Most of us knocking around going, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. Then realized that one of the things we didn't have was a TV. So we invested in this black and white TV just so that we could start getting insights into the culture, because we'd go to university and people were talking about things and making references and going, I have no idea what they were just talking about.
Yeah. And that's actually, getting a TV was also very helpful, because I don't like to discuss politics. I don't follow politics unless I'm very I'm very enthusiastic about something, and I'm a big promoter of something, of a change usually, be it environment, be it women's rights, and so on and so on. So buying a TV actually helped me assimilate more with people, because then I could actually discuss what I've watched last night, like Bake Off or Gogglebox. So getting a TV was also a very good idea. At some point now, I find myself that I watch TV more than I used to. So
yes,
yeah,
that happens too.
Yes, because I find more and more interesting things. I really love British drama, and this is something, again, I have in common now with my colleagues, because then I can discuss it, and it really is a big eye-opener as well.
Priya, you were trying to add as well.
Yes, I was going to add to the discussion that, that, you know, it's really interesting about how the point that Leslie made about cultures having a different way of expressing. So some people go a bit long-winded and take longer time as a result to express what they want to say and not answer the question directly. And that, I think, has quite significant implications on how our educational infrastructures, health infrastructures are built, because when you go and make an appointment to see somebody, you're given a certain number of time, whereas if you can't communicate in that time, then you are going to take longer, but the system doesn't allow for you to sit there and explain yourself for longer, which has major implications on then the dissatisfaction that comes from people feeling that actually their concerns have not been addressed. And same way in classrooms and universities, you know, you've got certain time to deliver what you need to deliver, but there are going to be students out there who are sitting there going, and also teachers, you know, who are explaining things. So they're going to take longer to explain whatever. So it's from how I'm seeing it, there's like, there's a infrastructural, inadequacy, may I say that, and it's not being addressed enough.
So maybe, Priya, we should call it inflexibility, because there are certainly advantages to the briefing, and depending on who you are, the system suits you more or less, and it's more about having that flexibility. And that point about the health care is something I've never thought about. Thank you so much for saying that, but I can imagine, and you can see how that would translate also into building stereotypes. GPs would be fed up with these people who come in, don't tell them what they want to do, and then if the person is feeling unheard, they might get a little bit more aggressive and demand their rights and to be heard, and suddenly you're in this vortex of negativity for almost no reason whatsoever, other than the fact that these poor GPs were given 7 minutes to talk to you and get it all sorted. So there is something about that inflexibility of the system that's really, really interesting. Yeah. So I don't know, for those of you who hadn't noticed the chat, there's a couple of comments. I put a book in, Nikki put in. I know that for me, watching the English was a real revelation. Really enjoyed reading that book. But on the positive side, it also explained to me why I felt so at home here. And like Leslie, even though I'm 100% born and bred in Egypt, I didn't really fit in that much. I'm not that different, but there were enough little clunky bits. I fit better here. And reading that made me go, oh yeah, that's why I'm more at home here. Things like having discussions over the fence, but not necessarily wanting someone, you know, you're not going to invite your neighbor in necessarily for tea until you've known them for years. But yeah, little subtle differences, and yeah, both the culture and the system. And if you're either lucky or not, but there are lots of things that are really very nice. And I go, oh, I didn't know I was missing that until I got here. But again, you don't know until you've experienced it, and it takes a while. Just like Priya's example with the healthcare, it's nothing I had thought about until I read about it or somebody says it, and you kind of go, oh yeah, that's why this is comfortable, or oh, that's why this isn't comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So could I please add as well? Hello everyone, Arushi here.
Hi Arushi.
Hello. So I thought it would be interesting to share a bit about my experience. It's slightly different in that I didn't. So I was born in India, in New Delhi. I moved around a bit, lived in Dublin for a few years with my parents' job, and moved to the UK when I was 10. So a lot earlier than some of the other women here. And my first language was Hindi. So I learned English sort of at school in Dublin when I was growing up there as well. But obviously came here and all the things that you guys say about the culture shocks were absolutely, very raw. And as sort of a 10, 11, 12-year-old, you're in the playground, all of those things are even more like, you question every single interaction that you have with other people. And I think probably the learning curve in terms of the British culture was pretty steep. When I look back on that period, like now as a 25-year-old and having had time sort of, working in like a professional environment, which is quite international, I realized that, and by the way, COVID-19 has meant that you've got so much time to think that you really become like a philosopher and you question things like identity in a lot more ways than maybe you would have done like a year ago. So this is like an amalgamation of all those thoughts. But I realized that, I didn't really appreciate and embrace the fact that the Indian part of my culture was just so strong, right? Like, if you think about it, there's like a billion people, more than a billion now, 1.5 billion who are Indian, like speak Hindi, like that is a benefit. And that is, to a lot of what Karolina was saying in your talk, like around being able to tap into the Eastern European market and like focusing on how you're adding value. Like as someone who's younger, you just try and fit into the system and you just try and, so I no longer speak Hindi fluently. And, I can understand it and read it and write it, but it's not something that I now feel comfortable speaking as a first language. And so I look back on that and I think, gosh, if only I had really understood that it was actually a benefit. And that kind of ties in a little bit with what Leslie was saying around, people from this country as well, and even those who maybe have grown up here for the majority of their lives, but have certain other cultural aspects to really like lean into those, I think is important. And just, oh, I'm low on battery, so I might die soon, but hopefully not before I finish this. And more particularly, what I've started doing over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and this was just because so I work in finance, I work on the trading floor at Goldman Sachs. So that's been, again, an interesting culture experience, but my initial boss, she was Indian, and she was Indian, like she had all of her formative years in India, and she was a lot more embracing of her Indian culture. She would quite happily talk in Hindi on the desk. And, it was just so eye-opening and so like amazing to see that, that is a strength that she embraces. And she was like talking to her clients. A lot of our clients are Indian. She would talk to them in Hindi. There are a lot of other people on the desk who wouldn't be able to do that. And, it's sort of, I'm glad that I've realized that now, that because of how globalized things are and it's only getting more globalized, and the fact that now people can remote work and things like that is helpful, and it flattens the structure a lot. But I guess I just wanted to share as well from like a slightly, having only worked sort of 4 or 5 years, there is a commercial benefit to leaning into your cultural diversity. And that's like at an individual level before we get into all this corporate spiel about, we really want to embrace people's diversity. So I think that has been a great realization. And now I'm like, okay, like I need to be watching more Bollywood movies because I need to like get my Hindi back, and so So it's just interesting to sort of zoom out, think about things, and then zoom back into, okay, so how can you actually act, and what are the things you can do? And so I would encourage everyone, if you have kids and things like that, to really like push them to these things, because it probably, you know, is something that they will appreciate.
Thank you, Rushi. That's such a brilliant point to probably bring it together and end our formal proceedings. I can see that Flora's got a question in the chat. Maybe Karolina and Zhao, you can answer her in the chat. I think Arushi really kind of brings to life that duality that Karolina started with, is how much do we appreciate our own diversity? Can we articulate the value, our strengths, and so on, as well as the appreciation from the employer and the organizations? And then as we've kind of meandered also through, and in some ways that went away from structures, but kind of thinking about what enables us to value ourselves, our employers to value us, but also for that diversity to work, and how do we translate that? Where do we have forums to discuss these issues? Where do we learn from each other? I know definitely that for me, within a year of being in Scotland, I met Leslie, and having Leslie as a friend is kind of, Leslie's also been my cultural guide. And I think we underestimate how we influence the people we're with, and how people influence us and help guide us. And actually, as organizations and employers, but as employees, how do we form these relationships and more formal structures? When you work in diversity and inclusion, it's, you know that just talking about issues doesn't help, but actually, do we have the structures for these bonds and these values to be created? Leslie, I'm going to close the meeting formally for those that need to go, but we're here for another 25 minutes for informal discussion, so please bring the point here. But if I just kind of say thank you very much to Karolina and Zhao now, and to all of you, so that if anybody needs to leave, no offense, please do. This is the formal end, but otherwise, if you've got time, please stay and chit chat with us and continue the conversation more informally. So shall we give a little round of little yellow hands to everybody, or real hands? Thank you very much, ladies.